guys, my name's Kevin. This is Kevin Talks Foster Care with Gay WK. And so let's get started today. So you guys, by now, I hope you know who I am and why I'm here. But basically, I am a foster parent myself of a little baby boy. And I decided to get into fostering and document my story to becoming a parent on my channel here on YouTube, Kevin Adopts. So if you want to follow that, please, when this is over, check out Kevin Adopts and take a look at that, where I talk about all the craziness about this journey about fostering. However, there's a deeper story here and a deeper agenda, I could say, and that's really getting into educating people on the foster care system. And what I found is when I went to start fostering, I wanted to see more people that look like me, that had lifestyles like me, that were single, that were gay, and becoming parents. And when I started, I went into private adoption and looked at that and really wanted to go that route because I really wanted to kind of control the child that I would be placed with, the child that was going to come into my life. Everything from the gender to the race to everything I could pick, I wanted to pick. I was also very naive to everything at that time. And through that and some disappointment with that process, I became open to fostering. However, when I started fostering, or when I started entertaining the idea of fostering, I only could go off of what I knew. And that was very negative impressions of the foster care system. So as I came to YouTube looking for more information about it and people that were documenting their lives through the foster system, couldn't find it. And then I decided to throw out my videos, and that's when things kind of sort of spiraled out of control, but in the best of ways. And that leads us here. I reached out to gays with kids and said, hey, let's do something together. Are you guys open to this? And that's why we started this Kevin Talks Foster Care, because they actually are passionate about the foster care system in itself. And I am as well. And we thought it would be great to start educating people more deeply on the system. I have found, and this is just my perspective, I'm not a specialist in this or anything, but I have found that it seems like there are more gay men that choose surrogacy or private adoption than it seems that they're choosing foster care. And that's why we're specifically trying to talk with single gay men on this, in these conversations on this show, so that we can bring light to this and show that, one, gay men, like, fostering is a wonderful way to become a parent. And two, being single does not have to stop you from becoming a parent. So that leads us into today with Reuben Ramos, and we're going to talk to you and get to know you and your story and how you became a foster parent and what that journey was like for you. So can you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about who you are and all of the goodness about who you are today.
Certainly. Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate it. And thank you for having me. I really, I think it's a wonderful opportunity. It's certainly a great, forum for us to discuss these things. You're right. There isn't a lot out there about this topic, or, this niche market. And so, thank you for having me, having us and for doing this in general. So a little bit about me. So normally usually the most common question is, why did you adopt? Why did you decide to adopt? And so, for me, it goes very far back, as far as, still being a teenager, knowing that one day I wanted to adopt. I knew that one day I could envision myself being a dad, and I wanted to adopt. That has always been my option, has always been my vision, that it was going to be through adoption. And so when I had the means and felt it was the right time, I started exploring that possibility and that opportunity. I remember that, very funny, I was listening to one of the other stories, and how you went from one place to the other, and how you had how you came up with this idea, right? Like the aha moment. And so I was actually speaking with a friend of mine who is always trying to pair me up with someone. She's always trying to marry me off to someone. And so
can I meet her? Can you please send her my number?
So we actually met up to have, we're just having a conversation. And during that conversation, she once again throws out the idea of, maybe we should try different dating sites. Maybe we should try this and this. And like, yeah, I'll consider it. And so the next day I actually was sitting there and I was like, it's not that big of a deal for me. I've always said, this is the right time. I want to do this. And what am I going to do? Try to date someone and wait for that to be established and then adopt? And that's too long. So I was like, no, this is something I'm very passionate about. I want to do it. And I know that I can't commit someone else's passion and commitment to this. So the next day I filled out the application, and that same day for foster care. And that same day I applied for my citizenship. So I was not a citizen. I wasn't born here. So I applied, and that's when that whole thing started, 2016, March of 2016. I was born in Mexico, grew up in Texas, and I was in San Antonio living there at the top of my career when this happened. And that's when I began the process. And it was a lengthy process for me. I think like many single gay male, I would know that in my class, there was like 25 parents, and I was one of two that were single and they were men. And so it's always very kind of scarce population. And so the chances of me being selected, I was like, I don't know what my chances are, but I'll keep trying. And so that's how that went about. Was approved, started in March, went to the training in July. And by November of that year, I was approved to begin. I was certified as a foster home. And that was at the end of 2016.
That's amazing, because there's similarities, but differences in my story. The similarity is that I understand what it's like, being, oh my gosh, first off, I'm gay. Are they going to say yes? And second off, I'm single. Are they going to say yes? But the difference is, like, I did it in 2020. So it was literally me. Like, I literally went through the entire training by myself. I can imagine sitting in a room with 25 other people, or however many people, and there probably were couples and women, and probably majority women, and just being like, where am I? And am I fit for this? I could imagine that being
the creeper sitting in the front of the room, just, the one of the only ones. And it's that way for when you go to adoption events. I don't know if you ever got a chance to go to adoption events, but if you ever seen the movie Instant Family, where they go to these adoption events, that's exactly what it's like. And so predominantly, it's a great, it's of course very dramatic, exaggerated way of it, but it's very much like that. You show up to these adoption events, and it's most predominantly Anglo couples, very few singles. I mean, maybe a handful, if even. And then I'm a minority, Hispanic, gay. And so there's like all these couples that always kind of hone in on the babies. And so it is really awkward. It's a very awkward situation. At least for me, it was very awkward. And so I usually would go into these adoption events and kind of wait around for a bit until I actually felt comfortable kind of interacting with kids, because it's not an easy thing to really go to.
I definitely had feelings of, man, I'm so glad this is going here, because I had feelings of being scared. I think I might have spoken about this in our first video, or maybe on my YouTube or something, but feelings of being scared of, like, people saying, oh, you're gay people abuse children, and that's why you're here, and you're single, and all of that stuff. So to go, I could imagine going to an adoption event and, having to, yes, most people want to adopt an infant or whatever, but I commend you, man, for doing that, because it would be scary. And as you share that, I think of how lucky I was to be able to go through all the trainings and everything by myself, because all I had was an advocate at the agency rooting me on this whole way through.
That's really good support. I actually did it through the state. I didn't do it through a private agency at the time. Living in San Antonio at the time, it was not privatized, so you can actually go through the training through the state and be certified through the state. So I actually went through the state training, and so that was different. It was different.
I have some friends I have one friend who who I met through my current agency, and then another friend who is currently going through the state as well. And, some people do ask, like, the difference is, like, do they have agencies where you're at now? And so what is the difference there as far as the process, if you're going to go through a foster agency or through the state directly?
Yeah, certainly. So it is, by the time that I was done with the adoption process, which was almost, 3 years or so, at that time, the region did privatize, meaning you had to recertify with an agency. There was no option of just being certified through the state. So every time that I had gone through the training, I had to recertify with an agency. Yeah, really. I'm like,
Man,
I love this kid.
man, yeah, right.
I had been doing
Wait,
it
so you
for.
you already had your son at that
I
time,
did.
right? Okay,
Right. I'd
so
had him
we'll
for
get
a
into that.
year, and that's when they're like, yeah, you gotta select an agency, and so you
Mhm.
have to go through the recertification process again. And so I did, and I shopped around for, I think 10, 14 agencies. I interviewed each one because you have a lot of faith-based agencies. I'm not sure
Mhm.
about other states, but in Texas, there's a lot of faith-based agencies, and they require, they can't discriminate against you being gay, but they certainly put some parameters and trainings that for me is just like, why am I going to put myself in that situation where I'm not
Mhm.
necessarily accepted? So I didn't go about that route. So I did recertify. And so the difference that I found is that, of course, when you go through the state, we're talking about state funding. This is the training that you're going for. You're not going to have as much support.
Yeah.
The caseworkers, bless their heart, they're underpaid and overworked, and they are, routinely changing. And so you just don't have the same consistency that you would with an agency. You don't have, and unfortunately, the same quality, and I can see why. And so it's just more inconsistent, bigger volume. The quality is not as great. And so not that it's bad, but it's just not great. And so with an agency, you do have more consistency. They have more centered trainings that are more applicable to you, that are more,
Yeah.
kind of quality of the agency. The support for me with the agency was better. It is more the rapport that you build with your caseworker. For me, was better, more consistent. It was a better quality for me with going with an agency.
Yeah, I found that from my experience that the people that are not with a licensed agency here, because in LA there you could go, like I said, directly through the state. The agency tends to be more consistently communicating with you, I find. Um,
Mhm.
and like I just got an email the other day from them about a training that's available because here you're required to have 8 hours of training every year to maintain your license, to recertify every year. I want to kind of maybe jump around a little bit and ask you about your son and the initial placement. Was he your first placement? Was he, what was that? What was it like maybe right before him and then as you met him and things like that?
Yeah, it was draining. It was
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Very unique situation. I mean, it's something that I could not have planned. He was
Mhm.
my only placement. He's been my only foster placement and the one. And so the way that
Mhm.
I went about it is, I started in March of 2016. That entire year, of course, I was certified at the end. So really, 2017 is when I kicked off into going into the events and being matched, right? Consistently, no, no, no. I went to 3 different adoption events. At each one, I did meet children that I would inquire about, and then just was not selected. My caseworker would send me children, profiles, and then I would kind of dissect it, think about it. Am I a good fit for this child? Are they a good fit for me? And there was just no match. There was a few that I said yes to and just was not selected. So Hector was actually my third and final event that I went to. I met him. Actually, I became a citizen like in May, and then 3 days later, I met him. And
Oh.
I met him at an event, and he was nonverbal, did not speak. I remember when I first saw him, I was just like, this kid, I love this kid. I didn't say anything
Oh.
because I had already gone through that so many times. And I remember seeing him there, and he was just, I still remember that. I remember exactly what he was wearing, his look, everything. So I spent the entire event with him, and his case, I guess, foster mom at the time said, he really responds to your command very well. I mean, Hector was not an easy child to have.
Mm.
He was
How old was he
nonverbal.
at that time?
He was 7 years old,
Wow.
nonverbal, and with autism. And so you're talking about someone,
Wow.
if children are in foster care and they're ready to be adopted, it's because things have gone really wrong. 90% of them have encountered at least multiple types of abuse. And
Mhm.
that was no different for most of these kiddos that were there. And so, and imagine going through that, being 7 years old and unable to speak. I mean, of course you're going to have behaviors. And so it
Yeah.
was a tough one. And so I inquired with them, and later on, I think a month later, I was told no. I was told that I was not selected. It made sense.
Oh.
The family that was selected for him, he was already there being fostered through them. There were a couple. had already fostered kids before. So, he was in Austin, I was in San Antonio. I would have had to switch all his providers and stuff. So it made sense on paper, right? I mean, I couldn't be mad about it, but I was heartbroken because when I
Of
saw him, I was
course.
like, he's the one. And
Oh,
so anyhow, after that, up to that point, I think, you mentioned about adopt only and how we go about this process. Up to that point, I was adopt only. I was like many parents, I'm sure, that are like, get in the system. They're like, I don't want to be heartbroken. I don't want to like have to give a child back. I don't want the whole
yes.
reunification.
Yeah.
And how am I going to deal with it? Uh, you know, Hector changed that for me very fast.
Mm,
After that, I was like, because I do know that there's a difference. If you're adopt only versus foster, it's easier to place children with you if you're foster or foster to adopt. That's just a no-brainer. The
mhm,
adopt only process is more tedious. You go through more meetings, and then what if it doesn't work out, right? And so
mhm,
it is a different process. I can see why they don't select as many that are adopt only. It makes sense. And so
mhm.
I was not selected. So after that, I was like, I will become dually certified. I will become foster to adopt. I'll take it if that's going to make it
Wow.
easier next time. And so I did. Was still not selected, and then I certified for respite. Was still not selected, and then at the end of that year, which was December, I was selected for two girls. There was
Oh,
3 and a 5-year-old, and I was told yes, and I was like, finally, like I've been selected. They're coming. They're like, we're
wow.
gonna place them next Wednesday. This was a Friday, and I'm in the middle of a gala when they call me, and so I'm like, so excited, and yeah, and then came, Tuesday, Wednesday. Came Monday, Tuesday, nothing, and I'm like, again. So I called, and they're like, unfortunately, they were placed with another family.
Oh.
That's enough. I'd been this had happened already a few times. So
Mm,
came January, I was like, I'm done. It's almost going to be 2 years. Um,
mm.
came January, I was like, yeah, I'm done. I need to move on. I tried 2 years. I think is enough. I can say, hey, I gave it what I could, but I need
Yes,
to
you
be
did.
healthy. I need to be emotionally healthy. So the 1 week I had a conversation with myself, and I'm like, I'm ready to terminate the license. And I was like, but there's that one kid that if they ever call me for, I will say yes. I don't
Mm,
care what's wrong with him. I don't care what the issue is. I will take him regardless.
mm.
That was on a Tuesday, and then the following Tuesday came around, and I actually was going into the office. I remember I was in the garage and I was just like crying because I was like, I'm about to send in my termination for my license. I was like, gosh, it didn't happen. I felt like such a failure. Like I was never selected. Why? And so I went up the elevator, and I go into my office. There was two sets of doors. I literally had just walked into the first set of doors, and had already this idea of like, I'm going to terminate my license. And that's when I got the call. And that's that's exactly when I got the
Oh
call. They called me,
my
and my
God.
my my caseworker said, "Hey, do you remember Hector?" I was like, "Yeah." She said, "Well, it didn't work out with the other family. Are you still interested?" And I mean, I in that instant, I remember that conversation I had with myself, and I was like, I said I would say yes. So yes, absolutely. And
Oh,
in that time, I did not tell anyone about it. Did not tell anyone about it because I had already gone through it several times. And every time that you are let down and then they say, never mind, you're
mhm,
not selected, your entire family and friends hurt with you. They're all cheering for you, they're all
mhm,
rooting for you,
mhm.
and they all hurt with you. And so this time, Hector had been the one that I said, he is the one. I love this kid. I did everything. After meeting him, I even went home and put my own provider directory for him, specifically for his
Oh,
needs. Uh,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I was so devoted, right?
dude.
And so I knew that if I was going to get a no last minute, it would be very heartbreaking for everybody. So I was in silence for 3 days, and then Thursday came
Oh,
around, and I still had not heard anything, and I was like, God, again. And so Thursday afternoon, as I was leaving work, I got that email that said confirming the placement tomorrow, 2 p.m. And I was like, this is it. So
oh
I had
my
my
God.
yeah, I had my to-do list that I had already made when I was not emotional, and could think well. And I said, if this was to happen, this is what I need to do. And the first thing on my list was
Wow.
send my out of office notification.
Wow.
Well, I had left my laptop at work that day, and at that red light, when I saw that email and the light turned green, I busted an illegal U-turn,
No.
and I went to send out my notification. And then yeah, that Friday, the next day, he walked in. He walked in, and I could not believe it. So that
Ruben,
is how it all started.
you have such a good heart. It is there's an energy or something about you that is so full of love. It is truly magnificent. And that story is everything that I needed to hear right now for reasons and purposes I cannot say publicly. You have no idea how much that story just hit me. It is beautiful. It is what I choose to believe as God's work working perfectly and beautifully. It is us wanting to give up, but the universe isn't done with us. There's even a sense of like it's like you mentioned it, self-care of like, I have to take care of myself. I've done this for 2 years. I have to take care of myself. I can't go through this again. But even as you're crying at the end in the garage, like it's like this sense of like, that it's not over. Like maybe something in you knew that it wasn't over. That was an amazing story. And I'm so happy to hear that what happened. I want to know for like it's so different in Texas. As you're explaining this, I'm like, wow, this is very different. When you mentioned adoption events and these things, like we don't have now. Granted, I started this during a pandemic, so really no one's going out anywhere.
They wouldn't have events,
but okay, so events, these events are events where you can go meet kids that are currently in the system, right?
Right.
Now you said you said, you're being selected. So, and it was so hard for you to get selected. Are there a lot of foster parents there and not many kids? Or because a lot of the experiences I'm hearing, people were being called the day before they're getting their license. We have this kid, we take this kid. How come do you know why it was such a different experience for you? Because this is the first time I'm ever hearing anyone say, 2 years, other than truly myself. I didn't wait 2 years. Like I was under the impression that I would get calls immediately because that's what I was told, because that's what the agency had always experienced. But because of COVID, things had drastically slowed down. And I went, I think, 2 months without ever getting a call. But do you know why it took 2 years? Like was there just why were you not getting picked? Do you know?
Yeah. And I would say not necessarily selected. I was sent a few profiles a few times where they were like, what do you think about this child? Like, this would be a good fit for you, But I was going into it with very holistic approach. I mean, I'm very lucky and fortunate that 3 of my friends had the perfect combination. One of them's a counselor, the other one's a social worker, the other one's a behavior analyst. So every time that I would get into these profiles, I would dissect it with them and tell me, what do I need to think about that I'm not aware of? What do I need to know? And so I was sent a few profiles where I know that they were really sending them to me because they were just really tough to adopt. They were tough to be placed anywhere. But at the same time, I would think about, am I doing a disservice to these children when they have very high needs? Am I going to be able to meet their needs? And if I was not going to be able to meet their needs, I was like, I'm not going to do them a disservice. It's not okay for me to do that. And so the ones that were sent to me were very, the very tough ones to adopt. And the ones that I would inquire about, more of a basic level to moderate, I was often not selected for. So as far as, is there an abundance of foster parents? There's not. I think there's always a need for foster parents. I think on paper, if I'm looking at it, and I think the culture may have something to do with it. Being in San Antonio at that time is like 70% Hispanic, and so the culture is very different there than it would in Dallas. And so overall in the state, I think at the time when I looked, there was about 16,000 children that were in foster care. So if I look at it on paper, I was a marketing director managing 16 counties. I did not have any family in San Antonio. I was just myself and friends, and single, male, had not had any experience with children. I think on paper, if I looked at that, I'd be like, yeah, no, I'm not going to put this child's life with this guy's experiment. And, it doesn't mean that it's not, that is right. But on paper, for me, it makes sense. And I'm looking at it from the perspective of more of like the caseworker, because if things go wrong, the caseworker, is their liability, right? It's the state's
the
liability.
city. Yep.
Right. And so I don't blame them for not selecting me. I can see how on paper I did not match your traditional profile of, we're going to place this child here, and then we're going to have to move them in a couple of weeks because this guy has no idea what he's doing and he has 16 counties to manage. So on paper, I could see why that would make sense. So I think that's why it took so long.
So, okay. So now, so you're placed with Hector, right? Let's learn more about this. So you're placed with Hector. He comes into your home. What goes through your mind? Because now it's not just like you just got to put your first placement. You got the placement because you said you saw him at the adoption event and you knew he was the one. You were told no, like you said he's autistic.
That's autism. Mm-hmm.
He's autism. He has autism. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you for correcting that. And it's good that I know, I don't, it's like I want to know how to properly address everything in life, as best as I can. So already something that can be more challenging to some people. And you were like, this is my child. This is the child for me, right? You didn't get him. Right. And then he comes into your house after 2 years. What the heck's going through your mind? Like, what is going through your mind?
Yeah, by that time I had sat there and waited. The appointment was at 2 p.m. It was a rainy day on a Friday. So by then it was 4 p.m. and I'd been sitting there waiting for 2 hours. I didn't know what else to talk to my caseworker about. And so finally I stood up to run to the restroom and come back. And that's when he gets there, of course. And I come back and I open and he's already inside and there he is. And I was just like, oh my God, he's right here. And I mean, I think me and just my instinct, the way that I am, I don't go into my emotional state and me at the time. I was more into that, what do I need to do to make him feel comfortable, make sure that he's okay. How do I approach him? At the same time, I'm yin yang of, oh my God, he's right there. And I mean, this kid, I would go, I managed Austin and San Antonio at the time. And I would purposely go to Austin more during that time, hoping that I was going to run into him one day.
I
did that for a month and I never did. And so there he was in front of me. And so I didn't know what else to say other than I came down to him and I said, hey, how are you? And hey, Hector, good to see you again. And we talked a little bit. He couldn't really interact in a conversation. He has very mechanic language. And at that time, most of his language was, yep. So he just did not really comprehend or could have a conversation. So I remember saying, can I give you a hug? And he said yes. And I remember giving him a hug and, I walked him into his room and just kind of had the caseworker going with him. And, kind of I have to go through tons of paperwork afterwards. And being the type A person that I am, I knew I was going to ask a bunch of questions. I needed to. It was not because I needed to make sure I was going to be able to take care of him properly. So it took another hour after that, but he was entertained in the room with the other caseworker, and I'm with the other caseworker dealing with the paperwork and asking all these questions. So finally they leave, and I still had not told anyone about it. When this whole thing was happening, I knew that there was going to be a handful of people I was going to call and tell. And instead of sending a text message that's going to require me to go back and communicate, what I did is I went down the line, and once Hector and I were in the room, and it was just us two, I FaceTime my parents and I said, I text everyone, say, I need you to be in front of your phone in a few minutes. Can you be there? And so they did. And so I FaceTime my parents and I said, hey, do you remember Hector? And mom was like, yeah, I remember him. I mean, my mom knew how special that was to me. And I didn't say anything other than I turned the camera towards him and us two. And I said, he's right here. And she was just she's like,
I'm gonna cry.
She's like, it's him? And I'm like, it's him. I couldn't say anything. I mean, what can I say? I can't. And because especially with mom, it was just like, this is him. I can't talk right now. I won't be able to talk. I just wanted to tell you that he's with me and he's going to be placed with me. He came back. and I was
Wow.
like, okay, talk to you later, and would hang up and go down to the next person. And I did that for each one of my family members. I have three siblings,
Wow.
and then I called, I think, three friends and did the same with them, the closest friends that
That's
had
so
been following.
beautiful.
So then I hung up and just
Beautiful.
focused with him. And that was my
Yeah.
first night with him. And I think there's a photo on Instagram of where it's like he's laying on the bed and he's asleep. And that was the very first photo I ever took of us. Like that was the first
Hmm.
night where I was like, he's right
Yeah.
here. Yeah, I couldn't go to
Yeah.
sleep. I went to sleep really late and both of our doors were open, and I would wake up in the middle of the night and just like check on him, and just, I mean, it
Hmm.
was unreal.
I remember that with mine, and like, I mean, and he was a month old, so I'm like, are you breathing? Are you breathing? Literally
Yeah,
going into
right?
the room, like, are you breathing? There were times I'd like shake his foot to make him wake up to make sure he's breathing.
I hear you. I hear you. Yeah. I mean, you just
That
want
is
to,
so
their life
beautiful.
is put into your hands. And so you just want to make sure that they're taken care of. And it takes a
Yeah,
lot of work to do that.
it's a lot of work. It is a lot of work, but it's so
Yeah.
rewarding and it's so worth it. So you have him, and then you're on this journey. You're fostering him. Um, what is the process of, when did things start turning around to adoption, and what was that like for you guys?
Yeah. So, no, I mean, the idea for me was always like, I'm not going to give up on this kid. Like this is,
Hmm.
I would do whatever I need to do to take care of him. If at the end, since he was not legally mine, I did know that, hey, a family member could come through last minute.
Yeah.
And are they going to select the family member? Possibly, because they want to keep them with the family, right? By
Hmm.
research
Hmm.
is what it shows, right? And so I went into it knowing that at the time he was not receiving all the services that he needed. In the state of Texas, and I don't know if it's the same in your state, but state of Texas, in order to receive services for autism, you need to have the diagnosis through a medical process. So, a doctor has to diagnose that. He had the
Yes.
diagnosis through psychological evaluation. That was not sufficient. He did not have it through the educational. In school, he was just like speech delayed. And so, of course, he's not
Really?
receiving all the services, right?
Man.
And the three are separate. You can have a diagnosis through psychological and educational and still not have the medical. You're still not going to get the autism services through the medical side. So
Hmm.
it took a lot of work, but the first 3 months, I was able to accomplish diagnosis on all three. And I mean, I would literally walk around with a bag, a laptop bag with all his documents, appointments, I
Hmm.
mean, I had a record. And everywhere I would show up, I would show him and share and stuff like that. And so I spent a lot of time. Finally, at the 3 month mark, exactly April 19th, which was placed with me January 19th, exactly April 19th, we got the diagnosis. And when that happened, I was
Mm.
like, finally. And
You
sure,
know,
after that, sure, 5 appointments a week is what I was dealing with on top of my
wow.
job that was
And
already
being a
demanding.
dad.
Yeah, yeah,
Just
right. And then had
the
two,
normal
and then
things
two
about
sick
being a
dogs.
dad. Oh
Right.
God.
And then two sick
Wow.
dogs. I mean, it was a lot. But and at some point, I remember. So the adoption process is, once you reach 6 months, you can then file for permanent adoption. I reached those 6 months, and that was probably one of the toughest times because that's when he was already healing and behaviors were awful.
Oh yeah.
There were a lot to deal with. I can't tell you how many times I left work to go pick him up from daycare, from school, I mean, I was there and I was like, call me. I made myself available because I was like, I
Mm.
want to be here. I want to be able to provide that support and teach me
Mm.
what happened with the behavior so that I know how to apply it, what I can
Mhm.
teach to the therapist and therapists can share with me. And so it's a consistent cycle there. And so, yeah, that's when it was really tough. The thing that held him the most was that he was not legal. He was not a legal resident or, U.S. resident. He was born in Mexico as well. And so,
Mm.
so he was not legal. So until he's legal, I couldn't adopt him and I couldn't file for
Mm.
his legal status because he was not mine, but I so there
Mm.
was really nothing I could do. So that's
Yeah.
what happened there. And it did go through the healing process was the toughest part. He did have, we had visitations with biological family, and I was always picking up on patterns of behavior and had a team
Oh.
of people I was dealing with. I mean, at one point I was dealing with attorney, advocate, which is their advocate, their legal advocate, my caseworker, his caseworker, and since he was originally from Austin, they had a backup caseworker in San Antonio for us. So 5 people I was constantly communicating with, plus the different therapies and, psychiatry and dental. That was all his services alone.
Wow.
And so I was constantly communicating with him, with them. It was a lot of work, but definitely once we got the 6-7 month mark, it started getting better, but I still just could not file for adoption. So it was May of 2020 when finally, actually April, actually I posted this today. Today is exactly a year that I got the call that they said, hey, he's
so
legal.
Cool.
And I was like, oh my God, like I know what this means. The caseworkers did not know what that meant. And I don't blame them. I mean, they have to know all these things on top of like immigration.
And they have insane case loads, at least out here in LA. Like they're so busy, so busy. Wow.
Extremely. I don't blame them. Luckily, I was not born here and I understand the process and I understood what it was like. And so when she told me that he was legal or he had his card, she's still talking about, okay, what do we need to do next? And I'm like, with a knot in my throat, I can't even respond. And she's like, yeah, so what do we need to do next? Like, what appointments do we need to take him to? Or what does this mean? And I was like, that's it. Like, this is it. Like, this is what we've been waiting for. And she was like, so it? Like, nothing else? I was like, that's it. She goes, what about him being citizen? I was like, I'll have to file for that. The state does not do their citizenship. I have to file for that with myself. So I was like, he's legal, which means he can be adopted. She goes, oh my God, okay, I can start the process. Because I know that part. So so that's when it began. In the middle of a pandemic, it was May 2020. That's when they started closing things down mid-March. So 2 months of being home, that distance learning, no job. So I lost my job middle of March, no job, distance learning, no gyms were open. I was going crazy. And I mean, we would be in the middle of a lesson for him and I would say, you know what? I need to walk away and I need to go run outside for a little bit. It's like 95 degrees and I don't like running in the heat, but I'm going to because I need to walk away for a little bit. So it was just that tense, but I got that call in the middle of it. So from then on, it went very quickly. They actually had a scheduled, they gave me the option of doing it online in June. And I'm like, that's too soon. I need to think about like, how am I going to make this happen? And then there's so much documents that you have to go through. Excuse me. And so I needed to give myself more time. I pushed it as far as I could. And so August of 14 of 2020 is the furthest I could push it. And I really was hoping for being able to have that in-person event. That didn't happen as much as I thought. And at the end of the day, I'm glad that was the most appropriate because along this journey, I've had a lot of folks who have supported us from different realms of professionalism and friends across Texas, across the nation that were, close friends, people who actually know me and knew about what I was doing. And so because we had the virtual events, everyone was able to witness that moment that had been cheering for so long. And so that's how I went about. And so when I got the call, I hung up after the caseworker and I was like, hey, Hector, come here. And I told him, and I was like, I always teach him ahead what it's gonna come, what we're waiting for, what's expected. And so he knew that it was just a matter of, we're just waiting for the judge to approve our process. That's what we're waiting for. And so, I told him, I was like, guess what? You're legal. I get to finally adopt you. And he just like ran, ran to me and squeezed me and was like, he said, I love you so much. He still has his challenge in him being able to express his emotions and how he feels. And so that is how he could express that. And he couldn't say much more after that. He just grabbed me and kissed me all over my face. And I know that was, that's just what he was trying to express. So after that, it went very quickly. It did go very quickly. I mean, had to read his file, the redacted file. You have to read it before you decide to adopt. That was, a 370 some page file I had to read through with all the details. And, I was kind of desensitized to that when I went through the training. I could read through those files and be okay. But I had not done that for so long. And now I'm reading about a child that I'm in love with. So to read through that took a lot of balance, emotional balance. It did, because now you're reading details about someone you're so in love with. And so, and so August came around and we got to finally adopt and we did it. And family did get to come down and witness that moment. Yeah.
So that is so beautiful, man. So how old is he now?
He is 10.
10 years old. Wow.
10, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
amazing.
he'll be 11.
Wow. So do you think you would do this again?
I had hair when I started this process. That kind of tells you how this went.
Yeah.
So I don't know what would I be losing then.
I know, right? With
That's
the
still
hair
a
on your
question.
face. You
Yeah,
got some
friends of
hair
mine like,
left to
yeah,
give away.
yeah, it'll be all grayed out by then.
Yeah,
Now,
right.
it's always been, when I started this, I always envisioned having two, and so it's not out of the question, but I don't know. This was not an easy process. It was not your stereotypical kind of way of adopting. It was not the way that it normally goes for a lot of people. It's been really a journey, and a very unique one, and a very tough one. And so I don't know. I don't know. I have to
I can
really need a break.
I can look, that's not even a trick question or interrogatory question or anything like that. Like I'm only, officially just over 2 months of having my child with me. And I can say that as a single person, one for me is the max, like maybe when he's older, I could do something like that. But I do think that two is it's a lot, so maybe when I'm with someone, that's a whole
Right.
nother story, you have that help.
Right.
But doing it by ourselves, it's a lot of work. And you said it, the process is intense. It is intense. I've been to so many doctor's appointments, so many, motor skill appointments, all different types of things. And but we do it because we love these children, so
Exactly.
honestly, that's about it. Like this was perfectly perfect. This was a beautiful example of, I think, why, just an example of how someone who is gay and single can step up and be a dad. You have done everything that a father should do for their child. I don't care how they became their father, you are doing it, and it is exactly what I think this is about. So I just applaud you because it's a beautiful story. I would like to ask you if there's anything you last want to say, and then also, like, do you want to give up your Instagram or anything? We'll put it in the description, and people could follow your journey or anything like that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. My account's not private anymore.
Okay.
So yeah, you can totally put it on there. It's
What is your
Ramos
Instagram
backwards.
handle?
It's
Okay,
Ramos
gotcha.
backwards, which is
Okay.
Somar, and then RR27.
Okay.
That's the screen name. So yeah, they're welcome to add it on there. But I think if I could say anything to any parents who are looking to do this, because since I started opening up about this, which is really just a few months ago, I did not share any of this for a long time. I was very private throughout the process. So it wasn't until lately I've received an amount of messages that are very heartwarming, that have been very deep. That takes a lot of courage, I think, to share with a stranger who you have no idea who they are, but yet they read your story and they're like, wow, this is deep, and I want to share something deep as well. And you're like, this is amazing.
Yeah.
I can't believe that just my life is inspiring someone else. And I think that the best thing to say is just don't give up. I mean, don't give up.
Yeah.
Be patient. It's gonna be frustrating. Know that it's not about you, and eventually things will have to change. Very importantly, boundaries. Your life has to change in order for this child to grow. They will not grow in your current lifestyle. You will have to change, and change is uncomfortable, and it's a lot of work to work through. Always have a therapist. Always have a deal of support of people who are willing to say, hey, I want to give you a day off. I know personally for myself, being very self-sufficient, independent, it's hard for me to say, hey, I want to just be by myself for a while. Do you mind watching them? It's tough for me to ask for that because that's not who I
Yeah,
am.
I relate. I relate.
So have friends and family who are willing to step up and say, hey, I want to give you a few hours off. And it's okay to not get it right the first time. I wanted to give up many times, and many times I cried a lot and said, can't believe I'm doing this, and maybe it's not for me. But just don't give up. It does get better as long as you continue to do it. Be patient. It's going to be frustrating. It's not going to be about you, but it's certainly worth it. If it's truly meant to be and is truly genuine about doing this, it'll happen. It's going to be tough. So,
man, this is great. You're such a good person. You're such a good person. I don't even know how else to say it. So thank you for sharing your
thank you.
story. And if you guys want to check out more of my story, you can just search on YouTube for Kevin Adopts, and the link's also in the description. Follow my journey there, get to know me and my little baby. And thanks everyone for watching. Peace out. Have a good day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.